Well, hello, Greg. How are you?
Keith, it has been a while.
It's been a while. We've both been very busy,
We have.
so it's been difficult for us to do our weekly. But having said that, what we've been busy with is some of the things we're going to talk about today. So,
Right.
it,
Yeah, very applicable.
yes, it was a perfect time for us to do a podcast. And actually, I call this showing people how the sausage is made, as opposed to
Yeah.
just the finished
Yeah.
product. So, um, having said that, the concept that we're working on right now with Engage HR revolves around the concept of fractional help. So the
Right.
ability to provide uh, people who are experts in specific areas for companies that are at a stage of their business that they can't afford full-time help, which means
Right.
early stage, they're in a growth pattern, uh, or they just don't know what to do. Things are going well, they've got funding, but they're just not sure. So,
Yeah. And I think what's interesting, Keith, is how this all came together is really through, especially your networking, as you've come across these folks. First it was you and I working together, and then you've connected with these other individuals, a lot of them with HR backgrounds, but um, it's just been interesting to see how this team concept has developed through the networking process. I don't think you had this as sort of a goal, but as you started meeting folks and kind of putting two and two together and connecting the dots, you saw an opportunity based on the resources of each of these individuals. So it's been fascinating how this has come together.
yeah, what's interesting, and as someone who's started and built a lot of businesses throughout my career, uh, what you think going in is not necessarily what happens as you start to move along the path.
Right.
The journey is not a straight line.
No,
It rarely
no.
is.
And I think the ability to be able to pivot and adjust and be flexible is and open-minded is to new ideas is critical
Yeah,
in any business.
no question. And what's really interesting is I think we're in a critical time where more and more companies are outsourcing. Um, some of it is based on where they're at in business, and some of it is based on the fact that they've had to lay people off, but they still need help. Just because you get rid of somebody from a department or a particular job description doesn't mean that work doesn't have to get done.
Correct.
So, which
Yeah.
I say every problem is an opportunity. And in this particular case, uh, having started the recruiting process of bringing on people that would be in our environment under Engage HR, you know, a consultancy was born, and we start bringing people who are extremely qualified. They are entrepreneurial. They want to be in their own business, and I always say that it's you know doing consulting as an individual, as you and I both have experienced, is very difficult because you can't wear every hat because you're either marketing for new business, and then if you get new business, you have to be able to implement what you're doing. While you're implementing, it's more difficult. So you're just juggling, and it's very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one thing to wear multiple hats. It's another thing to try to be all things to everybody.
Yeah.
And those may sound similar, but they're not, or they're similar, but they're not the same. Um, Again, it's one thing to be, kind of an expert in a couple of areas, but none of us can be experts in all areas. And yet, companies need expertise in all areas. And that's really what this concept brings.
Yeah, and of course, it's not unique to the sense of fractional help, but there aren't a lot of companies that have put together the full fractional menu of staffing that is available through our team.
Well, I think what you see out there in the marketplace is you'll see somebody puts themselves out as a fractional chief marketing officer, a fractional chief financial officer, a fractional HR executive. So they're all in their lanes, but again, they're one person, right? So they bring that expertise, but in a lot of cases, and the one we'll talk about today, there's multiple needs within the organization. They need more than just that marketing seat filled. They have other seats as well that are needed to be filled, and that's really what's kind of born this approach of having those fractional resources available for our clients.
Which brings us to today's topic, which is one, you already spoke about how we got to this client, but I want you to talk about how you actually generated this opportunity, which I found to be extremely interesting and creative. So if you would just talk about that, what you actually did and how you got the appointment.
Yeah, I actually went on. I've been going on Indeed and LinkedIn and looking at companies that are in the hiring process, and specifically looking for those who are hiring at that at executive level. So chief operating officers, chief financial officers, and HR resources. And I found this company that was looking for a chief operating officer. So I responded to their ad, but not with my resume. I just put in a cover letter, introducing myself and what I do, and asking if there were, if I could have 20 minutes of uh, their time to just talk about my background and find out what's going on in their business. And they responded to that and said, yeah, they'd like to have that conversation. So that's really how we got connected, was just looking at what their needs were, and companies put their needs out on Indeed or LinkedIn or other job boards. And I was fortunate enough to have them respond.
Again, as I said, I found that very inventive. So it really it opened up my mind. And what really, I liked it for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons that I really liked it was that when someone's looking to hire somebody, they know they have a budget for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not starting with somebody that doesn't have a clue about spending money to certainly plug holes in their business. And when I thought about it, I said, okay, I asked you the question, what are they saying the job pays? And I believe you said, what was the amount?
150.
So that 150 is truly 200,000, was plus benefits,
Right.
things like that.
Taxes, yeah.
Things like that. So you're sitting with someone who knows that they need to spend money. They acknowledge that, but many times, and I've done this myself as an entrepreneur, you're so I need help. Okay, so you go to what either your own gut tells you, or maybe you speak to some people and you say, oh, you definitely need a chief operating officer. Yeah, that may be true. Okay, so I'm not disputing whether they need a chief operating officer, but are they ready for a full-time chief operating officer?
Right.
Okay, so this is where someone like yourself, who's been a chief operating officer, can actually talk the talk, walk the walk, and basically provide some guidance. And by you having your meeting yesterday was an opportunity for you to learn more. What I'd like you to talk about is what you were expecting, if anything, and what actually happened in the meeting.
Yeah, so this was the second time I had met with this organization, and with their owner. And when I went in for the second meeting, it was really because I really felt like we had with Team Engage, we really had some solutions for them. Now, after the first meeting, I didn't have 100% clear picture of what their needs were. I just knew that through the discussion we had that there were gaps, because I heard that as the owner talked, and he recognized that there were gaps. What was interesting, I think, is through those first, especially the first conversation, was while he recognized there were gaps, I don't think he knew specifically where they were or how big one was versus another. So even business owners, I think, can get um, confused about where their real need is, because they're going in different directions, and they're focused on, he's very focused on the sales and marketing side of the business right now, and so from an internal operations finance standpoint, yeah, he knows there's issues, but again, doesn't really have his fingers on specifically what that is. So through that second meeting, we really were able to get down into a little more granular in terms of what issues were out there and how we might be able to resolve those. Now, through the discussion we were having yesterday, he brought up the fact that I have hired a chief operating officer. So that was a little bit of a, from my standpoint, not a surprise, but certainly an issue that came up that changed a little bit in terms of how this relationship was going to work, right? And I think as you and I talked, it would have been ideal if I could have been having this conversation 30 days ago with them, because perhaps here they are hiring a full-time COO, and is that really the need that they have, right? Would a fractional resource have been sufficient and more budget friendly? But that's what's done is done, right? So the discussion we had yesterday, once I found that out, the owner brought up the fact that, hey, I like what you guys, and I told him I'm part of the team, so I like what I'm hearing. I like what you have to offer from a solutions standpoint. We've talked before, Keith, about our HR store that we have with products available to help provide solutions to companies. But he said, I'd really like my new COO engaged in these discussions, which was fine. I mean, it's in the long run, we want that individual on board as well, right? We don't want to be going into organizations and working around leaders who are going to be impacted by what we have to offer. I tried to make a case for, and I don't think this is totally off the table yet, but hey, what if we came in and did our assessment, because that's typically where we start, and you could hand your new COO this finished assessment, provided by a objective third party, right? And now that individual gets to maybe hit the ground running a little bit more, because now they've got this third party objective assessment of needs within the organization. Perhaps we're giving some priorities to certain aspects of the company, like compliance. I mean, if there's compliance issues of any organization, those are not things you want to let sit and say, well, we'll deal with that when the time comes. You want to get on those right away. So that was the gist of the meeting, and how we left it was that there's going to be a time in the next couple of weeks where I'll have an opportunity to meet with the owner and the COO and continue the discussion of how we can be a part of their team and help them grow their business and really provide solutions to their issues.
That's great. And as you were talking about the point that he did not opt for the assessment. I'm thinking about it from my perspective. I can understand why, because I think he'd prefer that his new COO has no preconceived notions from a third party, and that basically can come in and make his own assessment about what's going on. And I think the new person might have felt a little bit um, uncomfortable knowing that he's still talking to other people. So there's that level of discomfort that comes with that stuff. It sounds like the owner is a very smart guy. Okay.
He is. I found him to be. He knows this business. I mean, he's been in it for 35 years. He's a former. He used to be a lawyer. He absolutely is an entrepreneur through and through. I mean, he is just your prototypical entrepreneur going in a lot of different directions with a lot of different ideas, but very open to the fact that, hey, I've got an organization here that I think has tremendous potential, but we need some positions filled, right? We've got some gaps. There's some tools that we're missing, and here he is as the owner, not even sure exactly what the needs are and the priorities. And I don't say that in a way to be critical at all. I think it's very typical for owners to sense and know that there are issues, but they just can't be, in all places at all times. And they can't get a feel for the priorities that those issues need to be addressed. And that's where I think this assessment will really be a benefit to them or to any organization that's in a similar situation.
Yeah, and the next step, and by the way, I think everything you did, in my opinion, is exactly what you should do. You didn't put any pressure. You put it out there. You said, okay, here's where I think we can still be of value. And he seemed very receptive to that, which is great. And
that's high praise coming from you, Keith. You've taught me well.
So the things that I'd like you to talk about is, one, the business he has. What's his business about? Okay. And where are the challenges that he's having, that you've been able to easily uncover from, your 2 meetings with him?
Yeah. They're a manufacturing business. They provide, I'll call them wellness products. They do both internal manufacturing, so they manufacture at their facility. They also have some products that are coming from offshore. So they're a combination of what I would say kind of again, the offshore manufacturing is not, they don't have control over that. It's just a third party that's doing the manufacturing. So when we start talking about issues and challenges, quality is an issue. Coming from that offshore supplier, product gets here to the US, they want to ship it to a customer because they've got orders, but there's something not quite right with it. So they have to, these are not products you can ship back to the vendor and offshore and have them fix it. They basically have to set up a little, I'll call it a little repair shop to address those quality issues for product coming from overseas. People, I would say, is, I know that's a real broad category, but they've got individuals doing the work, but they don't really have that management level, that professional management level within the organization. So the owner's having to, he wants to focus on bringing in new business, so he's out a lot. When he gets back in, he feels like, he has to put out fires, right? He has to now wear the operations hat, the shipping hat, the quality hat. I mean, he just feels like, um, he's getting stretched in all these different directions. And of course, when he's not there, he can't, he can't. It's difficult for him to follow up on those issues. Um, and they just have, I would say, this gap between the owner and the employees on the floor. There's about 45 employees, and to try as an owner to try to manage all those different functions and people, it's just becoming overwhelming. One of his comments was, "But I come into the office at 8 a.m. and my workday starts at 5 p.m. That's when I can actually sit at my desk and get some work done, because throughout the day he's having to, put out fires, getting interrupted, and it just, it makes for a very inefficient um, uh, organization."
So it's very interesting because one, I've been there, done that in my businesses. I've
Yeah,
had to wear many hats. It's not great to have to do that. Something is always going to fall through the cracks. You don't get to do what you're best at. You
right.
basically are doing jobs that people are much more qualified to do than yourself, and you struggle because this is the life of an entrepreneur, and that somebody who wants to build a business that doesn't have endless amounts of money. But the thing that's really striking is that for us as a team is that the relationship you're building with him, it's almost like we become like a menu item. We are going to build the kind of relationship. There's no pressure, but we're there. In other words, when you meet with the chief operating officer, your ability to connect with that person and make them feel like you're not a threat.
Yeah,
That the role that you can play, if it's accepted by obviously the owner and whoever else the decision makers are, uh, could be really important for them, because like any business, there are periods during the year that are busier than others. He's in a growth mode.
mm-hmm.
He told me he feels he could double his business given everything connecting properly with manufacturing. But he doesn't know how this COO is going to impact everything else that he's trying to do. But a good COO, and from what you told me, he's a former military guy, which I like a lot because they're generally very buttoned up and organized. He'll quickly realize where the holes are.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to report to his boss that this is where I think we need help. And guess who's sitting out there, okay, as a potential opportunity for the company to say, you know what? I don't have the budget to hire 6 people.
Right.
Let's hire 2 full-timers, and let's hire some fractional people in these areas, and let's grow to a full-time person.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think this is a company that at the size they're at, when you start thinking about bringing on full-time management / executive leaders, that becomes cost prohibitive. Um, and maybe as a company you can afford it, but is there an opportunity to plug in, as you said, kind of some fractional roles, and we grow into uh, full-time roles? I mean, you think of it that, okay, maybe they do need this full-time COO, we talked about this. They definitely don't need a full-time CFO. Now, that doesn't mean somebody couldn't come in and wear the CFO hat along with some other hats, right? And you kind of fill out a full-time role. But the challenge gets to be getting the right skills into the organization. I mean, that's the key, right? That's what the organization needs, is the right skills, and they need to be able to afford those skills. So if your need is 10 hours of CFO work a week and you hire a full-time CFO, how do you reconcile those other 30 hours that you're paying for? But now you're probably going to ask this individual to do things they may not excel at. You might be asking them to do accounting work, but you're paying them at a CFO rate. Well, that's inefficient, right? Let's get things aligned right. And if we need basic accounting work, then let's pay an accountant to do that, not a CFO.
Right.
But I think organizations, again, it requires to think outside the box a little bit. There's such a tradition of, well, I've got to hire a person and they got to work 40 hours a week. And I think we're seeing a world that is just not the case anymore. And we got to break that paradigm shift.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you think maybe you would have done differently, or something you wanted to say but didn't say in your communication?
I would say, just as a general comment, in situations like this, there's a desire to get to kind of more into the detail than probably what they're ready, the potential clients ready to talk about. I felt what was good is we did some planning for this meeting, you and I and the rest of our team.
Mhm.
So I had some feedback from the team as to questions to ask, and that really helped keep me on track.
Mhm.
And it kept me, at this point of the relationship, I wanted to stay at the 50,000-foot level.
Yeah.
Right? There's a desire and sort of the intuition is to start going, deep diving into one particular issue, and then you kind of go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And there was probably a couple of times I did that I shouldn't have. So I would really, from a business development standpoint, I think it's important there's going to come a time when that's necessary, but this isn't the time, right? At this time, it's developing the relationship, earning their trust, helping them understand how we can be a resource to them. And I think you said something really important, is that, we don't want to be viewed as, we want to be viewed as a solution provider and part of the team. We're here to, improve the business, not be an impediment to growth, but rather we want to propel that growth.
So I would say that from the client's perspective, uh, since he obviously is wearing too many hats,
Mhm.
that having access to people who are really experts in the areas that he's not hiring right now. Specifically, of course, this is a little self-serving, sales and marketing. I, I would love to have a conversation with him, because it's like talking shop with somebody. He's a sales guy.
Right.
So I think that I can make a connection with him that he would really appreciate, because I've been there. I understand the pains that he's going through. He wants to be selling instead
Yes.
of worried about quality control and manufacturing. So he's in that middle place where his business is doing very well, but the next stage, in order to get there, he knows he needs things, and he needs an outsider that can diagnose it. And I guess he's hoping the COO will be that person, and he may be.
Yeah.
All he's going to do, even if he diagnoses it, he's going to say, "Well, I think you need a specialist." Like going to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Everything's good except I'm hearing something in your heart that doesn't sound right. I want you to go to the cardiologist."
Right.
He's not going to do everything. He's going to diagnose, and he's going to say, maybe not even diagnose. He knows there's a problem, but we need a specialist to be able to determine exactly what that problem is. And
so he might triage the situation. And you said it the other day when we were talking, Keith, is, it's one thing to diagnose a problem, and then it's another to execute the solution.
correct.
So, a COO comes in and does their own assessment and identifies all these issues within the organization, maybe even prioritizes them. But now think of that, there's this big plate of tasks now that got to get done. And tasks is probably an understatement, right? Because every one of those issues is going to have multiple tasks that need to get done. So you got this plate of, a half a dozen or a dozen challenges. And underneath each one of those, there's a lot of work that goes into getting that solved. And for one person to try to do that, it just becomes, it takes too long. It challenges them in terms of where's their expertise at, because there's folks who are really good at, I think, triaging, but it's not the same skill set then to implement. And that's what's really awesome about our approach is we've got the resources and the tools to help an organization, whether we do the triage, because we can do the implementation, we can be, a long-term partner to help them go from where they're at in terms of their revenue to, doubling, tripling the business.
Right. The triage part is so critical, because if you don't diagnose the problem, not just one part of the business, okay, you have all these things going on all the time. I don't have time to do all these other things, but I need to hire somebody. Who do I hire? Okay, where is it? This hire is like critical, because will this hire have the kind of impact that's necessary, or will there be someone else who's just wearing too many hats? Okay? And that becomes detrimental to the hire you just made.
Right. You could burn that person out so quickly, right? Or overwhelm them so quickly. I think you've used that analogy about the doctor. I mean, can you imagine walking into the doctor you're seeing for the first time? He says, "Okay, we're ready for surgery." And you're like, "What do you mean surgery? You haven't even examined me. You don't know what's wrong with me." "Well, we're going to do surgery." Well, wait a minute. I mean, none of us, we all look at that and say, "Well, that's laughable." But how many times have we seen in business situations where we go out and we make a hire without doing the assessment? We make a decision without really having data available to tell us what the issue really is. And again, prioritization to me is so critical when a business is in a growth mode, because if you're not addressing the right issues in the right order, you may really run into significant issues.
Yeah, it's, I've used the analogy of, you open up a restaurant and you're the bartender, you're the maitre d', you're the chef, you know, you're serving the food. It's like you can't be in all places at all times. And, invariably you're going to drop some dishes, probably spill some wine on a customer, so
Right.
so those are the things that require a third eye, as you and I have talked in past conversations.
Right.
Can see things clearly without the emotion that comes from, I'm the guy, I know everything. I mean, I suffered from that in my business career where you want to be the solver of the problem as opposed to saying, you know what, I don't know everything.
Yeah.
Okay. These things are not my area of expertise. Let me get some third party that can actually come in and diagnose the problem.
But I think, again, to that prioritization issue, as humans, we have our natural talents and the things we love to do, right? But again, it's not about working on the things we want to work on. It's about working on the things that need to be worked on,
Right.
right? You may, if you're a homeowner, you love doing kitchen remodeling. But if your roof is leaking and you're spending time remodeling the kitchen, that's your priorities
Yeah.
are messed up. And what's going to happen? You're going to have a beautiful kitchen in a ruined house.
Yeah. Uh, that is backwards thinking. So as we close this conversation, what would you say the biggest takeaway for you in terms of what you learned and where you see engaged HR in terms of its ability to provide the kind of services and to scale?
Yeah, two things really I came away with, Keith. One, from sort of an internal standpoint, meeting our team, is we are absolutely offering the right solutions to companies. I mean, this is an absolute need out there in the marketplace, and it could be for a company, in the $10 million sales range, the $50 million sales range. Very. I mean, our solution is very scalable, um, and I just it validated what we're in just this one case. It really validated what we're attempting to do. Secondly, I would say to business owners is, there's, whether it's us or whether it's somebody else, is we're out there to really provide solutions to your organization. And if you're open-minded to this concept, I think it can just really accelerate the growth of a company, and it can be a game changer for your organization. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, the one thing that came out of that, another thing that came out of the discussions I've had is the owner recognizes he's got one chance to get this right. Because if they don't get the quality right, if they don't get product delivered on time, they are not going to get second and third chances with their customers. It's got to be done right the first time. And that's where I think an organization like ours, Team Engage, really accelerates and increases the probability of a company being successful.
It's great to hear. So uh, for me, I'm excited that you had that meeting. Of course, our team would love to have heard that, you closed the deal. These deals don't close. Even if he hadn't hired a COO, there was no way that to have this expectation that he was going to say, let's do this, because there's a lot of work that goes into it. We'd be going against our own way of doing business. We can't we can't tell you what you need until we do a full assessment. Okay. So it was very enlightening, and I want to thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Enjoyed our discussion,
Yes,
as always.
okay, thanks.